day, everyone. How are you? I hope you're doing well. Welcome to our presentation. Today, we are going to tackle about pragmatism. But before that, I would like to introduce to you my group mates who are also the researchers of this presentation. By the way, my name is Geraldine Tirando and I was tasked to make our video presentation and also sum up all of the important points that will be discussed later. And these are my super active group mates who did an exemplar research about this topic, which is pragmatism. Grace Sumalpong, she was the one who did the research about the major concepts of pragmatism in the philosophy of education. Gifani Tado, she was assigned to research about the advantages as well as the limitations of the philosophy of pragmatism. And last but not the least, Sheena Tagose and Warren Terambolo. They were the one who's assigned to have a research about the implications of the philosophy towards education, particularly in the Philippine educational system, strategy, and policy. Major Concepts of the Philosophy of Education by Grace Sumalpong. Pragmatism. The term pragmatism derived from a Greek word meaning to do, to make, to accomplish. The root of the word pragmatism is a Greek word meaning work. According to pragmatism, the truth or meaning of an idea or a proposition lies in its observable practical consequences rather than anything metaphysical. Philosophy of pragmatism. It can be summarized by the phrase whatever works is likely true, because reality changes. Whatever works will also change. Thus, truth must also be changeable, and no one can claim to possess any or final ultimate truth. In other words, pragmatism is the philosophy that encourages us to seek out the processes and do things that work best to help us achieve desirable ends. By Osman and Craver, 2008. These are the major concepts of pragmatism in the philosophy of education. First, pragmatism encourages learning information literacy by using experiences as a way to deal with new things both in personal and community life. Second, pragmatism is a philosophical movement that includes those who claim that an ideology or proposition is true if it works satisfactorily. Third, pragmatism is an educational philosophy that says that education should be about life and growth. That is, teachers should be teaching students things that are practical for life and encourage them to grow into better people. And lastly, according to pragmatism, the truth or meaning of an idea or a proposition lies in its observable practical consequences rather than anything metaphysical. And they are the proponents of pragmatism. First, Charles Sanders Peirce. Second, Ferdinand Conning Scott Schiller. Third, William James and John Dewey. According to Charles Sanders Peirce, pragmatism is that for any statement to be meaningful, it must have practical bearings. This has led many to take Peirce's early statement of pragmatism as a forerunner of the verificationist account of meaning championed by logical positivists. The early pragmatism of Charles Sanders Peirce developed through the work of William James and John Dewey in the USA and Ferdinand Conning Scott Schiller in Great Britain. According to Charles Sanders Peirce, pragmatism is that for any statement to be meaningful, it must have practical bearings. He was the one who introduces the pragmatic maxim or principle, which is first, the first grade of clarity, second grade of clarity, and third grade of clarity. The first use for the pragmatic maxim is the role it plays in Peirce's account of inquiry and the accompanying notions of truth and reality. For Peirce, the attainment of truth comes from taking investigation and inquiry as far as it goes. For Peirce, the pragmatic maxim is just such a criterion. Put it in its simplest terms, the pragmatic maxim allows us to see the difference the truth of certain concepts would make to our lives. The purpose of the maxim. The pragmatic maxim, then, is the means for achieving the third grade of clarity in our understanding of a concept. Peirce developed the pragmatic maxim and the clarifying method that it represents with some very particular purpose in mind. Ferdinand Canning Scott Schiller. A statement can only mean something if they are stated with a specific purpose. Schiller's philosophy was very similar to and often aligned with the pragmatism of William James, although Schiller referred to it as humanism. At first glance, Schiller appears very similar to James. However, Schiller's more stringent requirement that meaningful statements have consequences to someone for some purpose makes Schiller's position more extreme than James. For Schiller, it is not sufficient condition for meaningfulness that a statement entail experiential consequences, as it for both Peirce and James. Schiller requires that the consequences of a statement make the statement relevant to some particular person's goal at a specific moment in time if it is to be meaningful. John Dewey. For Dewey, a democratic society must be mobile and dynamic. It is a society in which teachers know that what works for one student might not work for another. He believed that experience is not a mental state that is within us. Instead, we are within experience. By Welchman, 1995. For Dewey, a democratic society is not one that makes provisions for equal participation in its good for all its members. This kind of society involves flexible readjustments of its institutions through interaction among the different forms of life. According to him, thinking arises as a means of dealing with these disturbing situations by working out hypotheses or guides to future instructions. He believes that if the student learned how to solve, presumably he would be better fit to living in our ever-changing world with its manifold perplexities. According to pragmatism, the theory and practice of education is based on two main principles. Number one, education should have a social function, and education should provide real-life experience to the child. There are four forms of pragmatism. First is the humanistic pragmatism. This type of pragmatism is particularly found in social sciences. According to it, the satisfaction of human nature is the criterion of utility. In philosophy, in religion, and even in science, man is the aim of all thinking, and everything else is a means to achieve human satisfaction. Second, experimental pragmatism. Modern science is based upon experimental method. The fact that can be ascertained by experiment is true. No truth is final. Truth is known only to the extent it is useful in practice. The pragmatists use the criterion of truth in every field of life. The human problems can be solved only through experiment. Third is the nominalistic pragmatism. When we make any experiment, we attend to the result. Our aim is examination of the material. Some hypotheses about the results invariably precedes every experiment. According to nominalistic pragmatism, the results of an experiment are always particular and concrete, never general and abstract. And lastly, biological pragmatism. Experimentalism of John Dewey is based upon the biological pragmatism according to which the ultimate aim of all knowledge is harmony of the man with the environment. Education develops social skill which facilitates one's life. The school is a miniature society which prepares the child for the future life. Principles of pragmatism. 1. Pluralism. Philosophically, the pragmatists are pluralist. According to them, there are as many words as human beings. The ultimate reality is not one but many. Everyone searches truth and aim of life according to his experiences. Number 2. Emphasis on change. The pragmatists emphasize change. The world is a process, a constant flux. Truth is always in the making. The world is ever progressing and evolving. Number 3 is the utilitarianism. Pragmatists are utility is the test of all truth and reality. A useful principle is true. Utility means fulfillment of human purposes. Number 4 is changing aim and values. The aim and values of life change in different times and climes. The old aims and values therefore cannot be accepted as they are. Human life and the world is a laboratory in which the aims and values are developed. Number 5 is individualism. Pragmatists are individualists. They put maximum premium upon freedom in human life. Liberty goes with equality and fraternity. Everyone should adjust to his environment. Number 6 is emphasis on social aspects. Since man is a social animal, therefore he develops in social circumstances. His success is success in society. The aim of education is to make him successful by developing his social personality. And lastly, experimentalism. Pragmatists are experimentalists. They give more importance to action than ideas. Activity is the means to attain the end of knowledge. Philosophy of education. Students need to learn practical, pragmatic, daily life skills in order to build a better society. Dewey wanted students to learn through experience and to think and reflect critically on their experience. Examples. Math could be learned by cooking, traveling, and building things. History could be learned by experiencing field trips, museums, and replicas. And reading can be learned through independently selected literature. And these are the evidences that we are utilizing this kind of philosophy in this modern generation. Like we have vocational technical schools, use of scientific method in classrooms, kinesthetic learning like role-playing, non-traditional learning techniques, and integrating technology into lessons. The advantages as well as the limitations of the philosophy by Tiffany Tado. Advantages: the ability to change and be flexible in an ever-changing world. Second, it gives the child freedom to discover things organically without being pigeonholed into doing things one way and one way only. And third, this teaches the child social skills and skills that will prepare them to be a functioning member of society once they enter adulthood. This will also develop and apply practical knowledge and skills for life in a progressive, democratic society. And lastly, this will also give our students an individual growth through processes, experience, and problem solving. If there are advantages, there are also limitations. First, it changes over time. For example, what is true today may not necessarily true tomorrow. Second, it fails to have clearly defined goals, which can make sometimes learning more difficult. And it puts too much importance on learning through personal experience while neglecting a more formal style of education. Learning through personal experience is great, but it's impossible to experience all things. So there must be some kind of formal education to help make the student better rounded individual. The implications of philosophy towards education, particularly the Philippine educational system strategy and policy, by Sheena Tagose and Warren Tirambolo. Educational implications. Educational as life. Pragmatists firmly believe that old and traditional education is dead and lifeless. Education is a continuous reorganizing, constructing, and integrating the experience and activities of race. They want to conserve the worthwhile culture of the past, think out the solutions to meet the new situations, and then integrate the two. Real knowledge can be gained only by activity, experiments, and real-life experiences. Education as growth. Thus, education will be useful if it brings about the growth and development of the individual, as well as the society in which he lives. Each child is born with inherent capacities, tendencies, and aptitudes, which are drawn out and developed by education. One of the aims of education is to develop all the inherent capacities of the child to the fullest extent. Education as social process. To pragmatism, man is a social being. He gains more and more knowledge through personal experiences than he gets from books. According to pragmatism, the education of the child should be through the medium of society so that he develops in him socially desirable qualities which promote his welfare and happiness. John Dewey rightly speaks out. Education is the social continuity of life. Education, a continuous restructuring of experience. Education is a process of development. Knowledge is gained by experiences and experiments conducted by the learner himself. One exercise leads to another and so on, and the area of knowledge is widened by the child. The process of reconstruction of experience goes on and leads to adjustment and development of personality. For pragmatists, educational process has no end beyond itself. In addition to the individual, it is continuous reorganizing, restructuring, and integrating the experience and activities of the race. And lastly, education, the responsibility of state. Education is the birthright of each individual and may not be within the right of the individual. So the state should shoulder the responsibility. The refusal of the state to do so may lead the nation to suffering. It is for the state to make the child capable and confident to meet the problems and challenges of life successfully. Pragmatism and curriculum. There are 4 principles of pragmatism in curriculum. First is the principle of utility. According to this principle, only those subjects, activities, and experiences should be included in the curriculum which are useful to the present needs of the child and also meet the future expectations of life as well. As such, language, physical well-being, physical training, geography, history, science, agriculture, and home science for girls should be included in the curriculum. Number 2 is the principle of interest. According to this principle, only those activities and experiences wherein the child takes interest should be included in the curriculum. According to John Dewey, these interests are of 4 varieties, namely interest in conversation, interest in investigation, interest in construction, and interest in creative expression. Keeping these varieties of interest in view at the primary stage, the curriculum should include reading, writing, counting, art, craft work, natural science, and other practical work of simple nature. Third is the principle of experience. The third principle is the principle of experience. The third principle of pragmatic curriculum is the child's activity, vocation, and experience. All these 3 should be closely integrated. The curriculum should consist of such varieties of learning experiences which promote original thinking and freedom to develop social and purposeful attitudes. And number 4, principle of integration. Pragmatic curriculum deals with the integration of subjects and activities. According to pragmatism, knowledge is one unit. Pragmatists want to construct flexible, dynamic, and integrated curriculum which aids the developing child and the changing society more and more as the needs, demands, and situation require. Pragmatism and methods of teaching. The principle of philosophy of pragmatic method of teaching is practical utility. The child is the central figure in this method. Pragmatic method is an activity-based method. The essence of pragmatic method is learning through personal experience of the child. To a pragmatist, education means preparation for practical life. To the pragmatist, education is not so much teaching the child things he ought to know, as encouraging him to learn for himself through experimental and creative activity. Learning by doing makes a person creative, confident, and cooperative. The pragmatic method is socialistic in nature. His learning should be thoroughly purposive. He should learn to fulfill the purpose of his life. The method employed by the pragmatist teacher is experimental. The pupil is required to discover the truth for himself, To facilitate this discovery, the application of the inductive and heuristic methods of teaching is necessary. Experiences should therefore be planned to arouse the curiosity of child to acquire knowledge. Textbooks and teachers are not so much important in pragmatic education. Their position is secondary in the teaching-learning process. They are required to suggest and prompt only. The teacher suggests problems, indicates the lines of active solution, and then leaves the students to experiment for themselves. The child learns for himself. Pragmatic education is thus auto-education or self-education. Pragmatic method is a project method which is of American origin. The role of the teacher in pragmatism. Pragmatism regards teacher as a helper, guide, and philosopher. Second, the chief function of pragmatic teacher is to suggest problems to his pupils and to stimulate them to find themselves the solutions which will work. Third, the teacher must provide opportunities for the natural development of innate qualities of children. Fourth, his main task is to suggest problems to his pupils and to guide them to find solutions. Discipline in pragmatism. To utilize the interest of the pupil is the basis of discipline. The teacher and pupils attack a problem jointly. Teacher's role is that of a guide and a director. Education becomes a social process of sharing between the members of the various groups, and the discipline proceeds from the life of the school as a whole. Pragmatism and aims of education. Education has no fixed aims. Pragmatism does not lay down any aims of education in advance. It believes that there can be no fixed aims of education. Life is dynamic and subject to constant change, and hence the aims of education are bound to be dynamic. Education deals with human life. It must help the children to fulfill their biological and social needs. The pragmatist educator aims at the harmonious development of the educand, physical, intellectual, social, and aesthetic. The aim of education, therefore, is to direct the impulses, interests, desires, and abilities towards the satisfaction of the felt wants of the child in his environment. The children should be so trained that they may be able to solve their present-day problems efficiently and to adjust themselves to their social environment. They should be creative and effective members of the society. Their outlook should be so dynamic that they can change with the changing situations. Being pragmatic, what does it mean? Being pragmatic is open to change, being open to the reality of today and working with a change to your benefit. So let us take a look in the universe. Universe is dynamic and evolving. The key term here is evolving. When you evolve, you change. So when you change, nothing can be permanent. So this would be the end of our presentation. Thank you for listening.